And we're live. How you doing, Jeff? Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday, indeed. Yeah, it's been a busy week. I'm happy that it's yeah. I mean, I'm normally happy that it's Friday, but yeah, all good. How are you?
I'm on the back of like 6-7 calls straight now, so I'm kind of wired.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, voice is getting a bit tired.
Yeah, hopefully we'll last okay through this one, but yeah, straight into another call after this as well. So it's exciting. A lot happening in the M&A world right now. So yeah, it's fun. Awesome. So what's today? What are we doing?
Yeah, so typically today is our FAQ Friday, frequently asked questions, or just not necessarily frequently, just asked questions. How about that? AQ Friday. So yeah, certainly if you're watching this live and you've got any questions, certainly pump them in there and we'll get to them live here. But yeah, just any questions that have sort of come in through the week that that we feel are sort of worthy of discussion and sort of warrant some extra chat. So but yeah, again, if you have any burning questions on your mind, send them now or send them through the week and we'll get to them next Friday. But yeah, welcome to FAQ Friday.
Yeah, this is exciting. This is one of my favorite shows of the week because we just get to kind of riff about different topics. It's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. So we'll start with one when we do evaluation for a client and we send out internally, we call it a listing pack, but basically, we compare the business to what's currently live on the market and current kind of investor criteria, and we come to a value range based on what the market tells us and where we feel investors would likely pay for the business. And so when we provide that range, and this was something that when we sold our business last year, we just were completely caught off guard on. But what we put in is sort of a net sheet, because again, all you're really concerned about is what do you walk away with at the end of it. That's you can sift through all the other crap, but it's like, that's all great and everything, but how much am I getting? How many zeros are going to be on the check? That's it. But so there's other expenses that you need to be aware of that sometimes aren't immediately clear when you're selling your business. You're sort of laser focused in on the transaction and preparing the business. And one of them is a lawyer. Because as we describe to people, we're business brokers. We handle the business terms. We help you negotiate and translate the business terms. But there's a legal aspect to this because you have to sign a legal document. And you need to understand if you're protected against any future liability. You need to understand all the terms of the agreement. And although we may understand it, we can't really give you legal advice. And so so I guess the question that came in this week was, what is the role of the lawyer? What do they actually do? Because it is an extra cost. And as we all know, lawyers ain't cheap. And so, and we've often said, don't cut corners here. This is important. So maybe if you can sort of expand on what the role is of the lawyer that you're going to include on your deal team.
Absolutely. And this is a good question. I mean, some brokers, marketplaces, etc., claim to include this in the service. And here's why it's a bad idea. You really want on your deal team, and we did a whole video on this, so I'll just talk a little bit about it, but then go into the actual the answer to the question. So on your deal team, you want the team that's their interest is they're looking after your best interest. And the problem with the broker doing legal is they're not lawyers. So I would never do that. I would always get independent legal advice when it comes to LOIs, anything you're signing, right? LOIs, right through the purchase agreement, even the agreement with your advisors, you could have that reviewed too, no problem there at all. So the attorney is paid a fixed fee. So a fixed fee or an hourly rate, they're paid for their services. They're not incentivized to get the deal closed. So that gives you confidence that regardless, they're looking after your best interest, right? So that's important. The second thing you want on the M&A attorney, you want someone with mergers and acquisitions experience, not a family attorney that's just racking up fees. You want someone who knows what it takes to get the deal closed. And it's even better if they've done some sort of e-commerce. If you're an FBA or e-commerce business, if they've had e-commerce experience, Amazon experience, transferring the assets so they understand what those assets are. Whenever we deal with an attorney on either side, either the buy side or the sell side, that doesn't have direct Amazon e-commerce experience, it typically creates some barriers, and they really need to understand what it is that they're trying to transact on. So you want independent legal advice, so you know exactly what you're signing, what your ramifications are, and that you're comfortable with that in the deal. You can always negotiate these points too, right? It's not a this is what it is. It's a negotiation. All contracts are a negotiation. The deal itself is a negotiation. So your advisor, broker should help you negotiate the business terms, but then your lawyer will help protect you and negotiate the legal terms so that you're 100% comfortable with the actual legal side of the deal.
Yeah. Now, and that's important to really like just point out that you want the right kind of lawyer for that too, like just as you said, because we talked about this too, about people saying, "Oh, I'll find a buyer and I'll just skip out on the broker commission because I just need to find a buyer and do it." And if you've agreed to work with a broker, and yes, you've got to pay a commission for all of this work, it's not easy to take a business through the transaction. So finding another way to like skip out on the legal fees and be like, "Oh, I have a neighbor's friend as a lawyer, I'll just get him to review it." They're not simply just reviewing the contract.
Yes.
That's not, there's so much more to it. And any good lawyer should not put their name behind something they don't understand. And if they need to take the time to learn it and understand it, then your bill is going to be bigger than it needs to be. And if you've got a family friend or a neighbor that's a lawyer, really all they're going to do is read the language that's in the document and say, yeah, okay, whatever, it's just boilerplate or whatever. They're not actually going to give you any legal advice, not really going to help you understand what it is you're signing. So exactly. Make sure you don't cut corners with that. And
now there's a real example of a downside of this. I won't go into the specific details because it's quite nuanced. I'll just talk high level. It was not a deal that we were a part of, but it's a deal I've spoken to a fellow advisor about that went wrong. Actually, I was talking to the buyer in this specific example I'm going to talk about. So the buyer they did the first draft of the document. Now, this is quite common actually for the buy side to bring the first draft, and then we kind of go from there. You can do a sell side draft, which is nice, but whichever side, the buyer or the seller, starts the contract, it's going to be heavily weighted in the favor of who wrote it, because why wouldn't you? You're starting the conversation. So what happened was they did their standard buy side favorable contract. The seller, who sold through another brokerage, we weren't involved in this deal. The seller used a cheap, super cheap. When I heard how much they paid, it's ridiculously cheap. Fixed price attorney. Now the fixed price attorney had e-commerce experience, mind you, but it was a very cheap rate. They just pushed the deal through and maybe didn't push back on this piece, one piece of the contract as hard as they could have. The deal after close, so this is sometime after close, there was performance-based bonuses, there was additional money payable. Now, what happened was part of the contract was very, like I said, very buyer-friendly. Some things happened after the sale, after the closing, after the handover, that didn't trigger these performance bonuses. But not only that, so they didn't get paid the full amount for the business that they'd agreed to contractually. That was based on the contract they agreed to. So they didn't get the rest of their cash. But to go a step further, because they weren't fully protected on the cash they'd already got, the buyers could actually go and chase the seller to recoup more money. So they weren't even protected on the initial cash that they paid out of the business. Now, this normally only happens in super extreme cases where there's fraud or something similar, something nefarious about the deal, right? You're hiding something. That wasn't the case here. Performance changed after the handover, and the seller was actually still on the hook. And actually, they shouldn't have been for that full amount. But because their sell-side attorney hadn't protected them enough, or didn't explain this piece to them, or maybe didn't negotiate that piece, they were left fully exposed, didn't get the asset back, had to refund money, and didn't get their performance-based piece paid on the deal either.
Wow.
So a nice 8-figure top line brag to your friends, I had an 8-figure exit, turned out to be, I don't know, somewhere in the range of 3 or 4 million max after the refund was all dragged through court. So legal fees on top of that. Nightmare.
Anyway, so get a good lawyer and make sure that you understand it. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I think we've buttoned that one up.
Yes.
So another question that came through this week, and this comes all the time. And so because it keeps coming up, I guess let's keep talking about it, because obviously people want to hear about it. But when I talk to a seller or a client, I mean, it doesn't matter if they're going to sell or not, but typically discussing something about their business, they're really trying to sell the upside to me. And I get that. But I mean, us as a broker, I mean, we're not the ones that set the price. So overselling the business to the broker is not doing you any good. Having said that, I appreciate the enthusiasm and definitely want to highlight the upside. And certainly we would carry that narrative into the market where we can. But certainly we can't oversell the business, and we can't expect a buyer to pay for numbers that haven't necessarily been achieved yet. And if the business is on an upward trajectory and you can sort of continue that line, I mean, that's great and everything. But again, that's in the future. And so a lot of the times buyers are going to have to look into their crystal ball and look 3 years down the line and see, okay, well, if we do this, this, and this, but that's up to them to decide how they want to handle your business.
Yes.
But the question we get all the time is, if a new buyer did this, this, and this, it would be worth way more money like down the line. How does that factor into the value today? And unfortunately, the short answer is it doesn't. But I'll let you sort of explain why. And I think that this is something that will keep coming up because everybody's excited and they're like, yeah, my business is growing and it's worth this much money. And if we just did this, this, and this, it would be worth that much money. And perhaps they don't have the resources to do those things. You know what I mean? So, but that's part of the reason for selling is you can hand the ball off to somebody who can achieve those things. But, talk about what buyers base their, what they're going to buy the business for. How do they base their value? And if they ever, and under what circumstances would they consider potential?
Yeah, this is a great question. And it doesn't have one answer, but I have some recent examples. So I could use not case study, a specific scenario, specific buyer. So a common thing we get is a really nice brand. They're focused on a niche market. So they have a suite of products that's targeted to this buyer pool, this target market, right? Same customer. One product is the bulk of the revenue, let's say. So a buyer sees that as risky. The seller says, well, we're in growth mode and these other products are coming up in, as far as percentage of revenue, these are coming up very quickly. And within 6 to 12 months, they'll be equal, maybe even greater than the hero product. So this could happen. Absolutely. And there's a trend already that's starting to happen, but will it happen is the question, right? And this is an actual real scenario. So let's talk about how some of the buyers have seen this. And this is recent too. So we've got COVID in the mix as well. So one, the change in buyer behavior right now is taken into consideration, and what this market looks like and where it looks to be going. So there's guessing happening. But specifically with this, there's risk. So there's one hero product, maybe some success in the future. So the way we're seeing this described from the buyers looking at this deal is, one, I'm going to pay for what I think it's worth today. And if that's not enough, then we need to bridge the gap. And it comes down to, what do the sellers want, and where do we think the value is, and how do we bridge that gap? So there's a couple ways to bridge the gap. One is performance-based. So if the business does this, you get paid that. There's also structure. So what this really is deal structure. But what you'll find, even if the top line multiple value gets high enough, the thing that really matters is what you're paid at close and what it takes to get the rest of it. And what we're seeing on similar deals like this is the seller's actually saying, well, this company hasn't run an e-commerce business like mine before. What are the chances that they can continue the same performance that we're seeing right now? So there's risk on both sides, but the fact that you're wanting to fast forward growth, not just fast forward your current income, is a big ask, right? So you could fast forward what you're currently earning at a multiple, which is say 3 years in advance, sure. But if you're on a heavy growth trend, chances are that you'll need to pad that somehow and have a mechanism to get paid if this happens. The other option is, don't sell it. Wait until this actually happens to give you a better outcome. But then
that's what I was going to say. Wait until you can prove it.
Yes. So wait.
It's better for everyone.
Is
better
the
for
best
you.
solution.
Better,
yeah. Yes. Yeah. That's the way to capture the value, is actually do it, not talk about it, right? And then still, you need to get comfortable with the fact that you're never going to sell at the peak. They call it a peak for a reason, right? A peak goes up and it goes down. And that's the trend.
You don't want to sell on the peak.
Yes, you want to sell on the growth.
yeah. And while it's growing too, it's exciting and money's coming in fast and furious, and you want to sell, but then it's worth this much, and every week it's worth a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. You need to pick a bus stop and get off the bus at some point. You need to say, I've hit my goal. And yes, of course, if I keep the business every month, it's going to be worth a little bit more, but you can't keep moving that finish line down. A buyer's just going to get frustrated, and they're not going to keep renegotiating. You just need to say, I've made up my mind to sell. The market's going to pay what I think it's a fair value for it, and I'm ready to move on. And the business is in a good position to do that, obviously, because it's growing. I've reached my exit goal. You can't just keep playing with the numbers and keep waiting, and start dragging it out and keep making the price go higher. Pick your spot, get off the bus, and move on to something else, or else maybe you will hit that peak during that time and it'll start to go into decline, and then you're in trouble. So just pick a spot that you're comfortable with, have an exit goal, and once you achieve that, then be happy with it.
There is a third option. So what we've said is, just to recap, option one is prove it, so do it and then sell. If you're wanting to sell, be comfortable with where you're getting off the bus. Like you said, the value here is good enough, and maybe there'll be a little bit of upside potential. I'm not relying on that. I'm comfortable with this. There's a third option, is there's a way to take some cash off the table and share some of that upside, but share some of the risk. And that's typically called growth capital. So you can get an investor to come in, buy some of your equity today at today's value, at today's value, and you retain ownership of the business. So there's minority investors, there's majority investors that do growth capital. So you could actually take some chips off the table today and continue to grow the business. And then you still have the upside of owning whatever equity you've negotiated to retain. if you go and sell it in 2 years time, 3 years time, you own that 70% or whatever it might be. And maybe you'll get access to capital along the way. A lot of the growth investors also provide financing at pretty competitive rates because they want you to succeed. So that's the third option. Not many people are interested in growth capital because they think, if I've just built the business over 3 years to 10 million in revenue, I could just sell it and go do it again. And maybe you can. But maybe if you think there's some room left, or a lot of room left in your space, and you're not done growing, but you want to de-risk a little bit, get access to outside capital, maybe growth investor. Looking for a growth investor is actually one of your options. I was talking to one yesterday. That's why that's top of mind. They're very successful at what they do, and they have a lot of capital and a lot of connections too. So it's not just cash. They have infrastructure, distribution to plug you into potentially. So there you go.
Cool. Next thing I want to talk about today is maybe I should just set this up because we talked about this a little bit yesterday, or maybe it was Wednesday, I can't remember, but it was about certain types of investors right now and their certain strategy right now about acquiring Amazon real estate and just sucking up all the ASINs out there, and they're offering business owners all sorts of different deal terms, none of which are very seller friendly.
Yes.
And so one of the people that I spoke to this week talked about a certain piece of their structure as stabilization payments. And just wanted to talk a little bit about, I don't know if we need to talk about this a lot, but basically, like, the question is, what are stabilization payments and what do they mean for the seller, and how are those typically seen as part of a structure of a typical deal?
Okay, so this is a made-up term, and it's bullshit.
Yay!
What it actually is a performance-based earnout, which means it's 100% at risk. It's not a stabilization payment for you. It's the buyer saying, if your business stays stable, or actually, oftentimes, if it stays on the growth trajectory it's on, which isn't fucking stable, it's growing, by the way, we will pay you this, right? That is not a stabilization payment. That's a performance-based earnout, 100% at risk, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, a buyer can say whatever they want. They can create terms like this out of thin air, and then for some reason it becomes the norm. We can do the same, by the way, as sell-side advisors. We can create things, and we do. We create things that become part of the deal. So it goes both ways, but just know what that actually is. So if someone's offering you a stabilization payment, the question is, what has to happen for you to get paid that money?
Which you have no control over, because
correct.
It's all in their court.
Yep.
And so you're holding all the risk there.
Exactly. What they're trying to mirror in saying stabilization, because it sounds safe, right? Stabilization payment sounds safe. What they're actually trying to mimic is a holdback, where they're saying, we'll just hold back 10, 15, 20% of the deal until you do your handover and training, or a time limit happens, and then you're paid. That's a holdback, and that's super common. 3 to 6 months, 9 months, maybe you'll be paid this extra money. What they're trying to do is mimic a holdback, but make a performance kicker so you don't get paid, or they control whether you get paid or not. And now, I'm not saying that they're specifically doing this to hold back on paying you. They're not. They may want to pay you the money, but what they're trying to do is reduce their risk and 100% cap the deal value. Because as a lot of the portfolio buyers right now are just buying cash flow, and they're trying to buy it as cheap as possible, right? So if they can buy your cash flow for 2 times what it is, so your net profit at 2 times, it's a 50% return. If the business is growing, they may get that back in a year or a year and a half. So it's a really good investment from the buy side, and they're wanting to cap what they're paying out for that cash flow. And it's 100% buyer focused, buyer friendly. And I just want you to know, everyone, to know what a stabilization payment is.
Yeah, and I know you've mentioned in the past too about, you know, like the where we're not completely opposed to performance-based earnouts, but you know, if you're offered a certain amount of cash at close plus a performance-based earnout, we want this number cash at close to be big enough so that you're happy walking away with this if that earnout never happened.
Yes.
So
100%.
There's the negotiation there. If they're going to throw in these performance-based earnouts, which you have no control over, maybe they're dummies, maybe they'll crash the business, you know, and you'll never get paid. So you need to make sure that you are 100% happy with this if that never happens. So this
Correct.
part needs to be big enough for you to say, yep, that's my hell yes number. I'm cool with that. Yeah. Better if I get this, but I'm happy if I just have that. So yeah, that's
and there's other,
so that when you're evaluating that offer, you sort of need to keep that in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And there's other deal structures that you can use instead of something performance-based. And we've talked about deal structures. Sure, we can do that again, but something where you have security, maybe you could switch to a holdback instead of a stabilization payment, or a note instead of stabilization payment. Maybe there'd be some income off it in the interim.
Something that
more
legally,
security.
something that legally binds them to pay that money at a certain milestone or whatever.
Yeah,
not
with recourse.
Not based on, with recourse, exactly.
Yes.
You know, there's got to be a penalty if they don't come through there.
Yes.
And it needs to be signed on, you know? So yeah, okay. But this is a good segue into the last thing I want to talk about today. I think we have another few minutes, because we talked on Wednesday about the creation and how, you know, buyers, typically their first offer involves very buyer-friendly terms. And the question I had this week was like, what exactly are buyer-friendly terms? What do you mean? Like, they're offering to buy your business for a certain amount of money. And if I like that amount of money, like what's the problem? What would make that more seller-friendly and buyer-friendly when you sort of funnel that down? If just a couple minutes on that.
Yeah, so things about the deal. So it might be really important for you to hit a certain multiple. This is very common. Like, I want a 3x, I want a 4x, I've got to get a 5x for my business, and then I'm happy. What's beneath that multiple is deal structure. And we just kind of touched on this a little bit with likelihood of payment, when it's paid, how it's paid, what has to happen for you to get paid. That is the piece that's buyer friendly. So a stabilization payment or performance-based earnout is very buyer friendly if they take over the business, because it's completely out of your control. So there's varying levels of control of pieces of a deal, because you rarely get 100% of the deal at close. As much as we would never say no to that, we're always open to 100% cash at close. And in fact, when I'm asked that by buyers, I often say, well, 100% cash at close works. So just to throw it out there, you know, you never know what they're going to say. So anything after close is at risk. It's just at risk in different variations. And the more control the buyer has over both the likelihood of you being paid and you actually getting paid, the more buyer friendly it is, the more control you have over that payment or the milestone or whatever it is. So example, you need to hand over the assets, you need to do 30 hours of training, and 3 months needs to go past. That's a pretty fair thing, because everyone can see the 30 hours was done, the training's done, you've handed over the assets, and now it's 3 months, I'm paid, pay me. Done, right? That's a fair deal. That's not a buyer-friendly deal. A buyer-favored deal would be if this business, it could be, here's an example we've actually seen before, performance-based earnout based on EBITDA targets, EBITDA margin. So they're saying, as long as this business continues at the same EBITDA margin, you'll get paid this. Now, on the surface, you think, well, nothing's going to change in this business. But
if they launch a product,
or they hire people, which they often do, it impacts the SDE, impacts the EBITDA, impacts the net profit. That's something they're controlling. It's not something you're controlling. So, and maybe you don't mind that piece of the deal because you're happy with what you got up front. But that's what it means when it's buyer-friendly terms. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I don't think so. I think that if I did, that would just complicate things. That's a good way of explaining it, is that, you know, if it says, okay, well, if it's, you know, for the rest of 2020, if it stays at this EBITDA, you know, you'll get your money, and that's great. But if they're going to like launch 2 new products, or, you know, spend a bunch of money to optimize the, you know, whatever, like, you know, bring in a consultant to sort of optimize the listings or whatever. I mean, all of that stuff is going to eat right into that thing. And like you said, you don't control that anymore.
Yep.
Not that they're specifically finding ways to not pay you. They're specifically finding ways to grow the business, which might end up in you not being paid because it did affect that line. So, yeah. But like you said, if you got all the money that you were hoping for up front, and that's just a bonus if it happens, then that's great. And maybe you're happy with that.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, cool. I think that was fun. We got through some good topics there, and still tons to go. But if you do have any other questions, drop them in the comments. We'll get to them next week, or just ask us in general in the group.
Yeah, indeed.
Cool. So how can people reach out to us, Jeff?
sales@thefbabroker.com. Best email to use. Comes to my inbox. And if you're thinking about selling, or just kind of want to check in what the market's doing and how your business might be valued by investors today, if you want to talk about exit plannings 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road, that's fine too. Sales@thefbabroker.com. We'll find a time to have a call, and look forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, by the way.
Yeah.
Any big plans?
Indeed. No, not at all.
Nice.
which is excellent, I think. I like it that way.
Awesome. Cool. All right, mate. Well, we'll catch you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Sounds good. Bye.